to get going, and we will get started. So first and foremost, I just want to say thank you so much for all of you coming down to this event. This is the first live one that we've done in kind of 15 months, I think. So we're super excited to do it. And I know it's only a small group of us, but it's just lovely to have you back in the room. Again, I could probably do this some distance away from everybody. So yeah, huge thank you for this. Obviously, we had the announcement on Monday, which means that we've had to put back perhaps our plans to go a bit bigger and a bit better for a little while until the 19th of July. But you know, hopefully from that point onwards, that'll be the last hump in the road, and then we can get going and we can move it forward. Huge thank you to Inside to hosting today, and I'm just going to invite Scott up for a quick second to just come and maybe talk a little bit about the hotel.
Yeah, I'll be brief, everyone. But thanks for joining us, and we're delighted. Ruth, our sales manager here, and delighted, and the rest of the hotel to have joined Pro Manchester as a venue. Andrew just mentioned then it's quite casual in here, isn't it? It's quite comfy, and I think this very much is kind of the Inside style. Inside by Melia is a Spanish brand, but Inside is a sub-brand of Melia, and it is very much a lifestyle brand. We aim to be a little bit quirky, a little bit different. I would invite any of you, if you've got the time post-session, to check out some of our other meeting spaces. We have the Big Ideas room next door, which is a quirky, creative meeting room full of soft, colourful furnishings and games and things like that kind of help people interact and write on walls and write on tech and all the rest of it. Really good for kind of brainstorming, business planning, anybody that's looking at, okay, how do we plan to come out of the other end of this mess we've been in for the last 18 months? That's a great room to be in there. It doesn't come up with all the answers, you've got to do that, but it certainly helps people to stimulate ideas. And then with the rest of the hotel, some of you might have seen that as a brand, we're opening new hotels. So we opened in Newcastle 4 weeks ago, to great acclaim. It's gone down really well, even in these times. They've been super busy, especially on the weekends, as has Manchester there on the weekends. And then we opened in Liverpool in August, with Glasgow and Leeds in planning stages as we speak, ready for 2022 and 23 openings. So it's a big time of growth for the hotel brand. Even in these crazy times, we're committed to the northern areas of the UK, which are obviously big, important markets for the Spanish hotels as well, in terms of all of us lovely Brits that like to go out to Spain on our holidays when we're finally back allowed. So very exciting time for Inside, and really for this hotel re-establishing itself in Manchester as a quirky lifestyle offering that comes at a really sensible price point as well. We want to be very accessible for both corporates and leisure guests, so we feel that we offer really great value for money. And also we've agreed a deal across our Inside hotels with Gino D'Acampo to run our food and beverage. So the restaurant downstairs, First Street Bar and Kitchen, is run by Gino D'Acampo's team, and in Newcastle and Liverpool, it's a Gino D'Acampo branded restaurant as well, which in the future we will probably transition to here in Manchester as well. But hopefully you see a little bit of a difference in terms of the culinary, and it's a little bit more restaurant F&B style rather than maybe standard hotel, corporate kind of conference style stuff. So hopefully you like it. Any questions or for site visits afterwards, please don't hesitate to ask Ruth or myself. Thank you. I shall stop talking now and leave it to the more important people. Thank you. Yes, Sam.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you so much. And thank you for hosting us for our first live event. We really appreciate that as well. Just before I hand over to the panel very quickly, you're probably not going to like me very much for this, but can I please introduce you all to Ollie, who's our new recruit who joined us on Wednesday as membership and sponsorship manager at Pro Manchester. So we're super excited. The team is growing, and yes, if you can all maybe say hello to him, that would be really nice at the end. Brilliant. Well, I'm going to hand over to our wonderful panel. Thank you so much again for agreeing to come and do this in person for me as well. So today, obviously, we're going to be talking about your green credentials, essentially, and how much that is, how important and the increasing importance of having your green sustainability processes in place to attract investment going forward as well. Never has it been as prominent and as important as it is now. So it's going to be a really insightful session from our panel here. I'm going to hand over to Heather, who's going to be chairing.
Hey everyone, so as I mentioned, I'm Heather Evans. I head up sustainability at Rise Over Bucknell, the
global consultancy. So I'm here in kind of a sustainability, wellbeing, social value perspective today. So we've got a really fantastic panel lined up for you all. We're going to discuss everything ESG, so that's environmental, social, and governance, what you guys need to do, all of the key elements and metrics that we need to look at, and then just a general discussion around the increasing value of all of that. So what we'll do is I'll pass over to the panel to introduce themselves, then I'll ask a couple of questions with kind of the panelist session. Then please do think of any questions. We've got a live Q&A at the end, so feel free to ask. Right, so
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. I'm Stephanie Wall and I'm the ESG Director at Palatine Private Equity. So we are a Manchester headquartered private equity firm that invests out two funds. So we've got a traditional buyout fund and an impact fund as well. So we apply our ESG processes consistently across both funds, but for the impact fund, we've got that added layer of really understanding what the company purpose is and what benefit that has to either the environment or to society as well. And being able to quantify and demonstrate that is really important to us as well. So hopefully I'll be able to give you a bit of a perspective from an investor point of view, what we look for in terms of, company ESG credentials from the kind of pre-deal phase right through to exit, and how we help to support our companies on that journey in the hold period as well.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Hesketh. I am a senior manager at Deloitte and I am actually an auditor. So I support our audit teams and audit clients in all things ESG. I also lead our ESG reporting and assurance outside of London. So I help clients and provide assurance over things like ESG financing, so green, social bonds, and then also kind of annual ESG reporting and advice on compliance with frameworks like TCFD.
Hi everyone, my name's Andrew Noon. I'm a director with a company called Anthesis Group. So Anthesis are the world's largest collection of sustainability experts. So our team is focused around ESG and in particular helping corporates generate that kind of ESG strategy, what stakeholders expect to take a company, large or small, through that kind of ESG journey.
as we mentioned, we'll be discussing everything ESG, so environmental, social. We've noticed a real shift from kind of compliance and risk drivers behind reporting on ESG through to really value-driven solutions for clients, whether that's addressing investors, whether that's stakeholders, whether that's the general public, how people can communicate all of that really good ESG commitments and how they've got the right way to report on it as well. So touching onto that, I'll pass over to Emily. So in terms of your view of what is driving the demand for increased measurement of ESG, what would you say?
Yeah, so when we talk about ESG reporting, we're referring to kind of anything that companies and businesses put out there into the public domain. So that might be via websites, annual reports, or separate sustainability reports. But there are quite a few different drivers, I'd say, and stakeholders as such that are really kind of making that impact movement. So one of the obvious ones is regulation. And here in the UK, actually, businesses haven't been subject to that much regulation so far, or at least until recently. So there have been things like the Section 172 statements, streamlined energy and carbon reporting, gender pay gaps, and for kind of listed businesses, there's also been the EU non-financial reporting directive. But more recently, we've seen the UK government implement the recommendations by TCFD, so all premium listed businesses will need to comply with TCFD for the first time this year. And TCFD stands for the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. So the idea there and the intention really is to integrate the kind of climate-related reporting with the back half financial reporting, and really show the financial risks and opportunities that climate change brings. Aside from regulations, that there are quite a few other drivers. So you might be subject to kind of drivers in terms of consumers. So we're seeing big shifts and trends into the food and diet trends, fashion, and combating modern slavery, even through to utilities and energy decisions and more green. But really, it comes down to where businesses want to position themselves in terms of sustainability reporting. So, do you want to be a kind of front runner and leader in the space, or do you want to be more of a follower and in the pack? We're also seeing pressure from supply chains. So we're hearing of a lot of conglomerates and supermarkets that are putting pressure on both manufacturers right through to raw material providers, and especially in terms of calculating their scope 3 emissions. So everybody's part of each other's scope 3 emissions. So really getting a grasp of what they really mean is key. We're also seeing more focus on people and employees. So there's definitely been a generational shift with a kind of younger workforce. But there are also topics that are key to any worker, like health and safety, diversity and inclusion, impact on communities and charitable giving that become really important for people at work. And even at kind of exec board level, we're seeing now a big shift in linking ESG matters to reward and remuneration, plus challenge on things like climate competency and kind of ownership at board level, shifting towards CFOs, CEOs. The other thing is pressure from lenders, I'd say. So we're just seeing continuous increase in the kind of financing, sustainable financing markets. So green bonds, sustainable bonds, new types of products coming to the market. And we're even starting to see lenders pull out of refinancing deals. So where companies aren't necessarily ticking the right reporting boxes in terms of ESG, even kind of long-term clients, banks lend. And I even spoke to a mainstream lender recently who said that they don't plan to issue anything but sustainable finance within the next few years, which is quite interesting. And then the final one, and probably the biggest driver that we've seen, and definitely we'll have more insight in terms of investors and what investors want to see, but ultimately it comes down to their decision making, which they want comparable information that they can rely on to make those decisions, and it's becoming a huge value driver for them, and will be going forward.
It's really interesting to see a list of all the different drivers. It's not just one thing that is driving it. It's really impacting every single sector, from right down on the ground level through to CEO level. So touching on that, Stephanie, how would you view ESG as impacting investment decisions and also enterprise?
So completely echo everything that Emily says. That, there's so many drivers, and we see this now as much more of an opportunity rather than just being risk focused. But that being said, as part of our kind of pre-deal to exit ESG program that we implement at Palatine, as part of that kind of pre-deal screening, we will do a risk assessment essentially to understand the ESG risks associated with that particular company, that particular sector and geography that they operate in. And that's not to say that we expect every company to be shining stars in all areas of ESG. And I think we've mentioned that it's really far-reaching. So we've got a 6-pillar framework that covers 2 environmental, supply chain, 2 social, which includes the people, health, safety, well-being being really critical, customers and community, and then the governance as well that underpins everything within that company. So we're not expecting the company to be shining stars in all of these areas, and really it presents us with an opportunity. If perhaps they're not that great in some areas, but as long as we are comfortable with the level of risk that we're getting into and are able to work with that team, manage that risk, and flip that into an opportunity, then we do see a real value in that company. And I think that management team buy-in and understanding of the value that it does create is really critical for us. We need to ensure that we're working with a management team that share the same values as us in terms of ESG. And I think for us, I think it'd be more of a challenge to get it through investment committee if we were working with a company that just didn't see the value in it and was a lot more, a lot of focus on profit rather than kind of balancing people, profit, planet, that kind of thing that we look for. So there is that risk element, but really we try and identify what those opportunities are as well. And we have seen a lot we've been applying our framework now for the last 10 years, and we've seen how instrumental ESG is in adding significant value to our portfolio companies. And it's really hard to do. Your next question really is around, enterprise value, and it is quite hard to put a pound figure on, your ESG projects and initiatives. So, we all know that diversity and inclusion, having a diverse board can add real value, drives innovation within the company, but actually putting a pound figure on, what that means in the bottom line, it's really hard to do. But what we've been doing internally at Palatine is, because we've got this wealth of data over the last 10 years, we've been able to kind of plot our the ESG scores of our companies and link that with the value and the return that we get on that company. And the correlation is quite extreme. It's like I fiddled the numbers or something. I think when I presented it to the partners, they were like, "Are you sure about this?" And I promise I didn't fiddle anything. But yeah, the correlation is really strong, and it's undeniable. And I know that there's other areas, other factors that contribute to that as well. But I think especially, more and more there's added value when it comes to sustainability and ensuring that it's embedded within your kind of business growth plan and your business strategy. And some areas or ways that it contributes to that value could be through things like cost reduction and operational efficiencies. So if you're a manufacturing company and you've installed more efficient machinery or technology or whatever, you're going to be saving significantly on your energy bills, and that cost comes straight out the business and onto the bottom line. Or it might be something that's a bit softer in terms of productivity within your workforce. I think Emily mentioned that employee or people now are looking to work for companies that are aligned with their values. It's more important to people and millennials and Gen Z than it probably has been in the past. So if you've got an engaged and productive workforce, you can kind of strip out costs there or add value there. And then just access to new markets as well. I think companies now are looking at the supply chain, wanting to partner with people, companies that are aligned with their values and can support them in achieving their sustainability commitments. So I think, if you are able to demonstrate that you've kind of thought about that it's ingrained within your business, then it can set you apart from some of your competitors as well. So, could add some top line growth there. Hopefully that answers the question. Didn't ramble too much.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And then moving on to what do you see in kind of the main challenges that businesses are facing when they're addressing the risks? And also the opportunities. What are the main barriers?
Yeah, I think Steph's given a good account of the kind of investment cycle, and what we see with our corporate organisations that we work for, I think, is that they get that ESG is like this proxy for good business now. So it's not this add-on sideshow that do sustainability that's done somewhere else. It's now this golden thread, you know, as part of the kind of commercial performance that, that a company can deliver. So if you're not looking at the right kind of environmental, social governance issues that are material to the kind of company you operate, then that's going to erode value over the longer term as some of these kind of climate change, diversity and inclusion issues crystallise quite a bit more. And I think we're already seeing that, you know, in the market. So look at Deliveroo as one example. So had issues associated with the gig economy and issues to do with labour practices, which basically when they started trading on day one, they lost a quarter of their value due to the fact that they hadn't really got on top of those kind of labour issues. That wasn't the only reason why they lost that value, I should say. You know, there's probably other fundamental reasons why that company lost that value, but large top tier investors like Aviva, Legal in General, all just stopped their part in that process because they didn't believe potentially that management could deal with that kind of issue. So we're starting to see these issues kind of crystallize into valuation and future long-term kind of business planning. So there's an imperative that, to the question, if you're not measuring and managing the right kind of information that's material to commercial performance, because you see it as a bit of a side issue, then it's going to really affect your value going forwards. And I think COVID has accelerated this. So, you know, the money flowing into sustainable funds, as Emily mentioned, the last 4 months of 2020 were as big as the whole of 2019 and 2020 put together. So there's this awakening of corporate organisations after COVID to go, okay, this is a taste of if some of these risks crystallise into non-financial issues, they're going to have a financial issue in terms of our share price, or if we want to move to that next stage of growth when they maybe go to Palatine and want to move into that next stage of the journey, if those ESG fundamentals aren't there, then they're really going to struggle in terms of forward. So I think the first message is we've got to take it seriously now. ESG is a kind of wall that is here to stay, and getting the right kind of materiality of the kind of issues that affect your business, whether it's your investors, your consumers, your employees. We're seeing a big push around talent now. So you know, a lot of sectors are struggling to retain talent. ESG is now becoming a big talent retention factor. So yeah, I think the first point is look at what's important and really take it seriously as a kind of commercial issue. I think naturally measurement and reporting, the other challenge is how good is your data? Where's your data coming from? So obviously it's not necessarily about how you get the data, it's about who's interpreting that data on your behalf. So again, another example, we're starting to see a lot of shareholder activism in the oil and gas kind of sector, where shareholders are basically placing other people on their boards because they've analysed the data, they understand that these companies aren't moving to net zero and then sort of solving the kind of climate challenge fast enough, and they realise that value's being left on the table and they should be pushing towards renewables. So you're not interpreting your data, somebody else might be, and they might be looking at that kind of value associated with ESG, or see it as a big risk that means they won't potentially invest in grow at a rate you'd like to. So I think just getting data flows, engaging any kind of data people within your organisations or organisations you're dealing with. The old adage, don't measure it, you can't manage. It's true with ESG as it's with any other financial metrics. And I think the final point on measurement and reporting is, I would say, in my kind of years of experience in doing sustainability reporting, it's quite a backward-looking exercise. what did we do last year, what initiatives did we do, and I think that, as Emily's kind of nicely highlighted, actually it's about positioning your business to the future and some of the regulations that are coming now. So being able to show potential investors or stakeholders that actually we understand these issues now, and we also understand how they manifest in our long-term kind of business model. So we're constantly advising our clients around, looking at how ESG can support their brand value, or making sure that reduction perspective that they're really being as efficient as they can be, and looking forwards as to what some of those regulations might help them be more efficient or help build value in the enterprise of the organisation or assets that they. So I think the third point there is just make sure you're looking forwards on ESG and not just kind of.
Very strong answer. I think that isn't it? Other people will highlight at the heart of you. Just kind of touching back on that, what would investors want that data? What do you want to see them be?
Yeah, I think the frustration that we have. So we within Palatine, we do a really robust annual assessment of all of our portfolio companies, and it's kind of that reflective view of this is what we've achieved over the last 12 months, but also over the next 12 months this is what we're going to focus on. And I think that's a really good point that Andrew made, that and especially with increased regulation, I think people can get a bit distracted with right, or we need to report on this because we've got to, and it can be at the detriment to then putting strategies in place to make sure that you are continually improving year on year. So I think making sure that the data that we're collecting is going to be meaningful, and we're not just going to collecting it for the sake of collecting data. We're actually going to do something, analyze it, and do something with it to plan for the future. And the frustration that we have is that we also get asked from our investors to report on our ESG performance and our company's ESG performance, and there's not a standardised set of reporting requirements yet. I know there's a variety of different standards, but if you're not signed up to this one, but you signed up to that one, but actually our investor wants this one, it's kind of pulling all bits of data together for a variety of investors as well. At Palatine, we kind of push out as much information as possible to try and avoid that happening. But I think for us, that's kind of where we'd like to get to, but then understanding and recognising the challenges that for each business, the material ESG themes are completely different. So it might be that over here we need to report on energy consumption. I mean, that's probably a really poor example because climate is material to every business. But water consumption or whatever it is, this company manufacturing, water consumption is significant, whereas we've got an office-based tech business over here. There's probably it's domestic use and they're in a shared office building, so we can't really influence anything when it comes to water consumption. So I think understanding your material ESG topics within your own business and starting there, and I think again that's a challenge with ESG, is that it's far-reaching and it might put people off because they're like, where do we start? And I think just doing a bit of a screening exercise to understand your material ESG themes for your business and what matters to your stakeholders, and focusing there for data collection, and then kind of building a strategy around that to make sure that you're not just kind of reflecting on what you've achieved over the last 12 months. You've also got plans in place going forwards. Something that we are focusing more and more on, and something that I think is happening in the industry, is having that outcomes focus or impact focus, and understanding what the outcomes are of your kind of ESG initiatives over the last 12 months, and whether that's just to pick a really obvious one, but job creation. For example, if you can monitor your employee numbers over the years, and you can understand the jobs that you've created, and therefore, and it's linked nicely with social value, what then are you kind of adding to local communities and learning and development opportunities and things like that for people in the communities in which you're operating. And I see that as a real focus area for us and within the industries, focusing on what those outcomes are rather than just kind of presenting the numbers, but being able to tell the story around, look, we've done, this was our challenge, this is what we've done, and this is what we've achieved. I think that's something that we should be focusing on more and more. It's important.
And it's that materiality check, what is relevant, the influence,
Yeah.
isn't it? Really need to lay down the groundwork for. To health quality, there's all, as I mentioned, there's so many different metrics and ways in which you can report and see what you're reaching. What would your view be on how we can avoid greenwashing, where it's using all the right terminology, but maybe not having that outcome focus?
Yeah, so the greenwashing concept comes back to loads of the good points that Stephanie and Andrew have just made. So the first step to combating greenwashing has got to be that implementation of globally recognised standards. And that will kind of allow for that comparability and consistency and ultimately accountability for businesses globally. So the TCFD requirements are a good kind of first step in that direction. But we also know that the IFRS Foundation are in the process of bringing together a sustainability standards board. And there the idea is that board will be in place by COP26 later this year, and implement a requirement of a set standard set of kind of metrics, KPIs that companies will need to measure performance against, but also potentially bring in that materiality concept as a double materiality concept, where companies need to think about not only the kind of inward financial impact of ESG matters, but also the outward impact on that the business has on its environment. The other thing that we're hearing from investors a lot is the requirement to make plans, not pledges, and that comes back to the financial impact that things like climate change are having on businesses. Being able to properly articulate how you plan to get to net zero or whatever that commitment might be, how it's going to be phased. It's unlikely that it's going to be a linear approach, but also then what's that going to cost you? What are the savings? What are the investments that you need to make? How are you going to finance all of that? And being able to report against all of those things each year, and being transparent when you don't hit the mark. The other thing that Andrew mentioned was on data and good quality data. So there's a huge focus now on the information that businesses are putting out there has got to be investor grade quality, and that's got to be underpinned by robust processes, systems, controls, similar to those that we have under financial reporting. And ultimately, where this is probably going is being able to kind of stand up that information to scrutiny and eventually assurance. So assurance at the moment in the UK is wholly voluntary, and we're seeing more and more of the kind of big FTSE businesses obtaining public external assurance, and that's kind of slowly trickling down to private businesses too. But we have seen the EU Commission have recently released their plan to implement a sustainability reporting directive, and that actually mandates sustainability assurance, which will fall under the financial auditor responsibility. So there's a good chance that we'll see something similar in the UK. We have noticed in the recent Bayes paper, which endorses Bryden's recommendation for an audit and assurance policy for businesses. And then there's a kind of ever-changing kind of things going on in the US, especially with the new Biden administration. So lots of things coming.
Constant in a state of flux sustainability, and I think quite often that can put people off. But understanding that you've got that data set there and there are frameworks that you can utilise as well. I think we've definitely noticed the same, you know, declaration of climate emergency without any real way of backing up what that pledge is. The sheer volume of businesses that have declared net zero carbon by 2025, what is your route there? Like, how are you going to do that? And for some, it's really easy. For others, they're completely relying on offsetting. That from the class pretty much is greenwashing. It's just a process. So Andrew, touching back with you, what would you view the top tips for measurement of ESG matters? How would you address that? For?
Yeah, and I should say, hopefully people aren't feeling completely overwhelmed about ESG and what they need to do. But I think, you know, to try and bring it down a scale, I think really you can start small on this. I know we're talking about big kind of global movements and global investors, global regulations, but actually in all of your organisations, you're probably doing a lot of great stuff already. So I think just the first step, a really small practical one, would just be to just gather the kind of things you do already, initiatives, the programs that sit in those E, S, and G kind of boxes. So are you measuring your carbon emissions? Are you measuring water, measuring those operational kind of efficiencies that kind of Steph mentioned in business? Thinking about your people and coming out of COVID, what's the kind of strategic approach you need to give people around talent and retention and governance? You know, we're increasingly seeing back this up, but this whole cyber security, if you're in a sort of customer space, then how you protect your customers' data is now a big kind of part of the investor landscape, that they want to see that you're compliant and that you're not going to be putting your customers at risk or any reputation damage associated with some of the governance issues. So, you know, governance is the sort of output in a way. You know, if you're a good business and you're doing good things, then the governance is kind of a bit of a hygiene factor that you should have zero breaches, zero harm. So I think, yeah, don't get overwhelmed. I think there's things you can package up right now that you do and start shaping that into some kind of ESG strategy. And I think the sort of frameworks kind of point, we are terrible in our sector for coming up with acronyms and the latest flavour of the month kind of framework that you should look at. But I think if I had a gun to my head and somebody said, yeah, which one should we do? I would probably say the sort of UN Sustainable Development Goals. You should take a look at those just as if you want to see what the impact you might be having on any of those goals as a business, then that's quite a quick short circuit way to just go, well, we think we have a business that helps tackle climate change, so we're going to do that. If it's food business and it's zero hunger, it's zero hunger, sustainable development goal. So yeah, just be really, really steady in how you kind of get to a sort of place where you want to report out. And obviously with that is your audience. So who are you trying to tell this story to? You know, it's all very well coming up with a great strategy and telling everyone to do these great things, but if you're missing the key component of who's going to get value out of that story, then I'm just thinking of a client we're working for at the moment where it's all about the social, it's about their employees, it's about their staff retention. Whereas I'd say 9 times out of 10, our ESG strategies are about energy, water, waste, climate change. So we're starting to see organisations really understand their kind of social purpose, their social impact, social value dynamic. And just because you've got qualitative data around issues to do with ESG, that is okay. Plenty of organisations put reports out there that are very qualitative in nature. They say, we know it's qualitative, but we want to collect data in the future, and here's our path to collect that data. So I think being authentic about what you want to report and how you want to report it is really key. And I'm sure Steph and Emily, in terms of the assurance of reports, creating reports on behalf of SDs, can probably see straight through things that are maybe greenwashed or aren't as authentic as they should be. So I think keep your audience in mind and keep it authentic. And then I think the impact part, we've discussed this impact, whether it's climate impact or social impact. We know regulations are driving towards companies understanding what their impact is, and sustainable finance disclosure regulations, which mentioned as well. They basically drive big investors and companies to understand what their impact actually is. So, start small, but this kind of reporting, this thinking of ESG as a mainstream business issue now isn't going away. Unfortunately, this is a wall of activity that is being used, as I said, as that proxy for good business. So if you can start small, build it up, understand the data, understand if someone's going to assure that data, what do you need to do, how robust does it need to go, what does your audience look for, make sure you've done that materiality kind of approach to understand what is important, who wants to see it, then I think that would be a safe place to start around that measurement reporting. Without sounding like a politician, I guess it's materiality in terms of that. You're going to do something, just make sure whatever you're going to report is material to
It's a really powerful message of just start small baby steps for you to do. And I think a lot of the time businesses and organisations have this fear of reporting poor news. It's not that you're just at the start of your journey, and being really open and transparent about that is actually quite often a much more powerful message than trying to hide it away. So yeah, that would be wrap up. So thank you all for your comments. That was kind of the main questions. So open it up to you guys for any questions that any of you have. Is there any kind of learning topics that you'd like?
I thought you got anyone else but we talked about pledges. So can't talk about pledges and not talk about the biggest pledge for Manchester. And the fact that we've decided that we're going to go a hell of a lot quicker than anyone else. So I suppose I'd just be really interested to hear from the panel. Is this an achievable ambition? It's a great ambition. I think 100% everybody's behind it and wants to get behind it. But is it achievable? And have you got any sort of thoughts on how is that achievable?
So for one, as a pledge, that's actually backed up by really good science. So Greater Manchester is actually one of the local authorities that has pledged something with a really robust roadmap behind it. So they've had the Tyndall Centre of really good carbon modelling behind it. And that's an example of they've reached out and engaged as much as they can. It's very much a challenge, very much ambitious, but it has also spurred on all of the other organisations to get involved with that and see how they can commit to it. The other part of that pledge as well is that it's not just on the Greater Manchester Authority, it spills out into everybody that is in Greater Manchester to all play their part. And if by using that as their methods of pledging, I think that's actually really powerful.
I suppose the other parallel to these kind of pledges is we talked about the flows of money to make these things happen. So it's all very well setting a pledge, but money has to flow into actually making that achievable. I think with our corporate organisations, we start to see much more engagement with the CFO now, or a financial controller around, okay, so somebody in our business has said we're going to be net zero by 2030. And how much is that going to cost? And then they give them the bill and say it's going to cost this. And then the CFO sort of has a bit of a freak out and says, can somebody actually chunk this down for me into how am I going to get there? What does it mean? So pledges are great to also stimulate education with the kind of people who are fundamental to this now. This isn't sustainability practitioners or a sustainability manager in GMCA or in corporate entity. This is about CFO understanding, how am I going to find the money to do that? What does that mean for our business? What benefit am I going to get? Like working cost benefit. So it will be I'll give you all this money, what's the benefit back from it? So I think, Andy Burnham was in this mindset, but sometimes you just got to put a stake in the ground and say, just have a crack, have a go, let's see if we can get there. And obviously, our pieces were involved in modelling data, and obviously those interventions then need to be practical and chunked down small. So we need to work out what are the easy things, what are the low cost things, and then what are the things that are getting away from it, to spend money or innovate and develop a solutions business that generates a renewable technology that company can sell to others around the world. So we've got to use a pledge to stimulate innovation, stimulate wider kind of collaboration between sectors.
Just to add, actually, so it's funny, I was having a conversation with the CFO a few days ago, and we were actually talking about implementing TCFD, and his first reaction was, oh, this is going to eat into my margins because we have to recognise all of these risks that we've never previously done before, and I'm not going to be able to pass these costs on to customers, and blah, blah, blah. And actually, that isn't what we're trying to achieve here. These are essentially things that you would have to pay for anyway, because it's going to come at some point. But calculating it up front and kind of providing for it and making sure that you've got that plan in place is really key. The other thing, just on kind of financing some of these things, and it comes back to what are top tips for businesses. Green financing is a whole topic in itself. But one thing that or a challenge that we've seen when it comes to reporting and what you might use in reporting against financing versus the other types of reporting you do, we are seeing businesses kind of trip up where they may kind of set up a facility reporting certain metrics under that facility, and it being completely different data, KPIs, metrics to what they use elsewhere, either within the business internally or what they put out publicly, when really those things should be aligned. So it shouldn't create more work for you. You should be kind of reporting and measuring those things anyway, and making sure that you're leveraging the work and the data and the processes that you've got in place already, and using the same KPIs or metrics.
A lot of hands.
Oh. I just wanted to pick up on something that happened because it is a big challenge to I sit as an non-executive on the reports all the data side. But in, say, the housing sector, it is actually now driving our decisions going forward, because we are committed to doing retrofitted properties, and there's a lot of uncertainties in that area because we don't know what the best way to do that is. So be driven by the negative. Some companies and organisations particularly divesting of those properties that they don't think they can do that with. The amount of money involved in how do we raise that at a time when we've just come towards the end of the COVID crisis, whereby we have a lot of residents who are completely showered by the pandemic. So our income drops, our ability to invest changes, our portfolio has things that we want to do. And we need to innovate to say, well, what is the best way to get those carbon emission processes? So it is a bit multi-headed, really, and a considerable challenge. Of course, the way I like to think that we are working collaboratively with other organisations, because we know everybody's confronted by the same challenges, but no one organisation can support it. So we are trying to group think about the best way to do that. Perhaps that might come out with some new business, actually do the work of the rest of it. Not a lot of government money around. So yeah, it is driving decisions. So companies, boards are in the process of actually rethinking their business. Like a rock rolling down a hill, and then it's going to get bigger. And of course, the challenge is quite small companies. They have to be thirsty. People, it's a journey. Very much.
Just to respond to that, I think what Steph is talking about is sort of a bit doom and gloom. You know, it's all about risk and it's all about what the climate's going to be like, all these challenges. But actually, the flip of all those risks is the opportunities, as you say. So, and Greater Manchester take a national lead on, you know, enterprises that go in, retrofit buildings efficiently, make them work, deal with more social issues, maybe associated with fuel poverty as well. So then you start to link the E and the S together, and you actually create that green jobs, green economy that facilitated in Manchester because they made the pledge to go early, and then from the early pledge comes a whole load of innovation and green growth that Manchester could hopefully export, you know, around the rest of the country. I know that's like the holy grail of how it should work, but that's got to be the vision, you know, and that's kind of this discussion today in a way, that thinking ESG terms in a way, that's how you rethink the upside and the sustainable solutions businesses that can go out and retrofit things. And hopefully people get a seed in their head saying, yeah, we used to be a contractor that did you know, fits and renewables on houses, actually got those same skills. Why don't we create something that pushes at the door of retrofitting? Because all these local authorities and cities are saying they want to hit this carbon pledge by earlier than 2050. So it's that entrepreneurial kind of mindset that I think we're all a part of, and all a part of that ecosystem, to try and help kind of drive that journey, as you say.
Agree with that. And actually, you mentioned divestment as well, which, you know, I think a few years ago there was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction of kind of large investors saying, "Oh, we're going to pull all of our investments out of kind of fossil fuels and those types of industries." When actually, I think now we're coming to the realization that some of those companies are also doing some of the best things in terms of kind of renewables and plowing money into those. And actually, by divesting, you're putting shares in those companies into potentially the wrong hands, rather than those investors who are keen to push the right things. And I think that plays back to us as Manchester as a community. We don't want to see businesses fail. We don't want to. We want to meet that pledge and commitment. So actually, as a community, can we pull together and work together to make that economy and truly build that city, really?
Definitely, I think such a jobs element, not just sustainability consultants that are going to be generated out of all of this drive. Like, there's going to be such a wide range of really highly skilled roles that are going to be across the Northwest, whether that's to do with hydrogen power, whether that's to do with retrofit coordinators. There's going to be such a range of different areas, and it's switching. Every single business now has to switch towards, okay, how do we address the climate emergency? But look at it, emergency makes it sound so terrifying, and it is, but it's an opportunity as well. There's such a wealth of roles and opportunities out there. I think it's really important to kind of switch to try and think a bit more positively about it.
So on that topic then, a bit of investment in achieving that net zero target towards 2038. Do you think the closer we get to that date, the more grants and investment may come from not only Greater Manchester, but UK as a whole? I know recently we've seen things like green recovery and West. 10, 20 different innovation funds you can get in technology. Do you think the amount of money going into them will increase, or is that remain the same and hope starts up and held out.
My view of it is it has to be a complete split between public and private funding. It can't be one or the other. They really have to work collaboratively to try and make sure that these solutions are there. We can't rely on central government to make sure that all of that is funded by that deadline. They will do as much as they can, I'm sure, but private funders as well also need to play that part, and they really are. It's just the access to that and the understanding that that's going to be through.
I think as well that, and this might not be specific to that route to net zero, but I think now more than ever, companies are recognising that they've got the agility, they've got the skills and knowledge and the desire to really address the sustainability agenda internally. I don't think companies are now waiting for government policy, waiting for legislation to change. I think companies see it as the opportunity to make, first mover advantage. So, let's be proactive, let's get on the front foot, and not wait for that policy change. I think, people are recognising, whether it's in the personal life or whether it's in, corporate life, that time is running out. We're going to have to do something, soon. So let's act now, and let's not wait for government change.
Completely true, actually, because even down to our business model, we've got a North American practice that historically not ever touched anything to do with sustainability. There isn't that requirement by the government, there just isn't anything there. And everything that's changed recently, they haven't waited on it, they're set up by themselves to sort out their carbon footprint, and they're really addressing it. So I think kind of the key message there for me would be that if you are in an organisation that isn't necessarily doing any of that ESG, it's probably an open door we can push on it to say, we've got really good data, we know why we're aiming for it, let's see if we can do something about it and start that journey.
I'm just going to mention, like a true accountant, not necessarily just grants and funds, but also tax breaks. So there's loads out there in terms of green funding green investment, but also consider things like apprenticeship levies. So going broader than just the E. Even if you're kind of not just seeking out cold hard cash, but there are other kind of breaks and ways of saving money in that aspect.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the screw is turning as well. So during G7 week, the government quietly put a note out saying, if you want to bid for a contract over £5 million with central government, you've got to show that you're on a net zero journey. So if you're a big contractor, you've got a big supply chain, and the contractor has to show that. You can be sure as damn it that they're going to pass that through the supply chain as well. So this is a right to play now. This isn't like oh well, we can get away with it for another couple of years. This is like if you want to play and be in sectors and doing business, then you've got to do that at whatever level it is, otherwise you won't be a part of that system. So although that's 2050, I'm sure Simon might see that down. So I'd say it's a kind of just get on with it. There is that kind of message in the way of whatever you want to touch in any market, whether it's private money flows or government contracts, you've got to show this. You've got to show you on this.
We've seen in so a few of our portfolio companies, they do a lot of public sector tenders, and we've seen the weighting associated with social value has gone from 1% to 15%, literally overnight. So again, if you are to make sure you're competitive, you need to ensure that this is on your agenda and that you're being proactive.
Really, the social value, actually, the social value has been around 2012, yet only now we're seeing it being really clearly addressed in terms of even the KPIs and financial incentives. Our clients have to sign up for voluntary incentives to say, if you don't hit those social value targets, we are going to take that hit ourselves. So, it's a really interesting view of it's coming across the board from each area of the ESG.
Just a question for Steph anyway, is whether you think, or whether it's already happening for ESG sort of deal teams, the structure of deals, and whether now it's based on what So we pull our cash on ESG targets.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something that is cropping up more and more. I'd say, currently we don't. So ESG is always included in kind of, appraisals of our investment team and CEO and chairman roles. But there's no kind of hard cash linked to that, or, if you don't achieve that, then you're not going to get whatever. But it's something that we're considering more and more because, it is cropping up more and more. And similarly with carried interest as well within private equity firms. So some of our investors are asking, are you going to, remunerate your staff if they've achieved whatever target it is associated with ESG? Is that going to be linked to financial incentives? Currently, no, but I think we're on that journey to it being linked, definitely, yeah.
And the sustainable finance disclosure regs push that as part of that. So if you're compliant within those regulations, then remuneration and showing exactly those kind of things as part of what you have to disclose.
Well, I think that's it. We are actually out of time, so we are going to have to wrap it up there. Although we could probably go on for a lot longer, couldn't we? So just from me, a huge thank you once again for all of you coming on and attending our first live event in 15 months. Real thanks to the panel for taking part and giving us some really great insight on the world of ESG. I think we can all agree that actually, if we are going to reach Manchester's target of 2038 and net zero, then we all have to get actively involved and we all play a part. So it's about how we understand how we can actually have that impact and what change we can make together. The Pro-Manchester Green Economy Group, the chairman, the group co-chair actually this time as well, Brad over there from Thesis. And we are really proud to be working alongside a lot of the authorities in and around Greater Manchester on the Zero Carbon Business Programme, which is about helping businesses understand how they can get involved in achieving that goal for Manchester. So if you need to know any more about that, please do let us know. But we are going to be part of it. There'll be a consultation process and there'll be a series of workshops and programmes coming out over the next 12 months or so, which would be great to get you all involved in that as well. Thanks again to you. Thanks again to the panel, and a huge thank you, obviously, to Scott and to Ruth for hosting us here today. Thanks very much, everyone.